Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The president appears to be terrified that he has a, quote, rat in his midst inside the White House. That, I should be clear, that's his word, a rat. It's not the kind of language that we're used to hearing from the President of the United States, who is, of course, entrusted by our Constitution with ensuring the nation's laws are faithfully executed, and who's responsible for appointing our most senior law enforcement officers. You'd expect to hear that word in a very different context.
Your uncle was a rat.
No way.
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Your uncle was a rat, and now he's in the witness protection program.
It's my father's brother you're talking about.
Now, the president is assuring the country not that he has obeyed and upheld the law, but that he does not hire snitches. Tweeting, the failing New York Times wrote a fake piece today implying that because White House counsel Don McGahn was giving hours of testimony to special counsel, he must be a John Dean-type rat. But I allowed him and all others to testify. I didn't have to. I have nothing to hide. The president referring to Nixon White House counsel John Dean, of course, who is credited with blowing the whistle on Nixon's law-breaking and ultimately leading to his undoing. And that's how the president responded to the New York Times blockbuster report this weekend that the current White House counsel, Don McGahn, has been cooperating with Robert Mueller's investigation for months, participating in at least 3 voluntary interviews over a remarkable 30 hours. It's jaw-dropping news, a huge development in the probe examining whether the president himself obstructed justice or might have done other things that exceeded his powers. McGahn would seem to be an unlikely rat, as the president put it. A longtime happy warrior for the GOP appointed to the Federal Election Commission by George W. Bush. He's also driving Trump's successful efforts to fill the courts with conservative judges. That includes, of course, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, who McGahn escorted to meetings on Capitol Hill today, though reporters were interested in a different topic.
Why did you speak so long to the special counsel, Mr. McGahn?
Did you comply because you thought the president would betray you?
Do you regret that decision?
Will you continue to comply?
Have you briefed the White House on everything you told the special counsel?
Now, McGahn has been involved in most of the key events under investigation in Mueller's obstruction probe, at least as far as we know, including Michael Flynn's early ouster from the White House, the president's campaign to get Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself, the firing of James Comey. It was McGahn, you'll recall, according to the Times at least, who threatened to quit last year when the president tried to have Mueller fired. In fact, ordered him to do so. The Times reports that in his interviews, McGahn laid out how the president tried to ensure control of the investigation, but that he cautioned to investigators he never saw the president go beyond his legal authorities. It's not clear whether any members of the president's legal team, past or present, has a real grasp of just what McGahn told Mueller's team.
We have a good sense, obviously, of what Mr. McGahn testified to. I can figure it out from...
How do you say that good sense? Have you debriefed him?
No, but Mr. Dowd has a good sense of it. He talked to them at the time.
So you don't know what Mr. McGahn, you don't know 100% of what he
through John Dowd, we have a pretty good sense of it, and John Dowd yesterday said, I'll use his words rather than mine, that McGahn was a strong witness for the president. So I don't need to know much more about that.
Okay, well, this all seems like it's cleared up. Now, while the president agonizes over the possibility of what he called a rat inside the White House, although he said he wasn't one, his former employee, Michael Cohen, is reportedly about to face charges for over $20 million in bank fraud. Cohen's attorney says he's been in touch with none other than, you guessed it, John Dean himself, about how to flip on a president. Meanwhile, as the jury deliberates over the fate of his campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, they're still deliberating. They ended deliberations today. The president has publicly defended Manafort and attacked the prosecution, which certainly looks a lot like an attempt to taint the jury pool. Now, get this, the president's threatening to go even further, telling Reuters he has chosen not to be involved in the Mueller probe, but is totally allowed to be if he wanted to. I've decided to stay out. Now I don't have to stay out, as you know. I can go in, and I can do whatever. I could run it if I want.
It is Tuesday, the 21st of August of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, folks. Just a smidgen of Hungarian hot paprika makes all the difference. Keep the Old Bay up in the cupboard, okay? Bring it up for the clam bake. Otherwise, keep it tucked away and just do it, please. Well, what a world we live in. You know, I'm really getting over this treasonous MFer's gaslighting. Aren't you? He can do anything. He is God. He can take over the Mueller investigation and run it himself. Who thinks like that? Yeah, someone who's got an inflated idea of self-worth, which this guy does because he's not even as rich as he claims to be. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are now, huh? If he was rich as snot, typically, you don't go running to Vlad for some help. All right. Well, this is where we're at. Mueller is the threat to American democracy, not Trump. White nationalists are asked to leave the White House because they got too many already. There's only so many chairs. And like I've mentioned before, apparently this white nationalist that just left wasn't the one that misspelled all those tweets. So someone else. I mean, it could still be Trump writing those tweets. I'm not necessarily convinced all of them are. Okay, so, Stephen Miller's still there. What does it take to get that guy out? I don't know. Oh, the VMAs were reunifying torn apart families. DHS, Kirsten Nielsen and others actually told the courts that since the ACLU the American Civil Liberties Union, is so concerned about these vermin infesting our shores, let them take care of getting these things back together. And of course, the court said that is ridiculous. The ACLU doesn't have the resources of the United States government, let alone all the information the United States government holds on the people they tore asunder. So it occurred to me, maybe we should have the VMAs reunify families, and then we could make it a big spectacle. Of course, you know what's going to happen. It's going to turn into a Hunger Games Survivor type spectacle. You can be reunified if you can survive this terrible calamity that we foist upon you. As if tearing your family apart isn't a terrible calamity in and of itself. But, it's sort of like Chopped, the cooking show. No one goes on that show unless they're in desperate need. And I don't know what it is about America that finds it fascinating to watch people, scrap around for a scrap of meat. Or a vegetable, depending on your, please. Oh, boy. Speaking of which, PETA affected the Animal Crackers design people to take the animals out of the caged rail cars and put them in the savannah. Well, they look pretty good that way too. But change has got to be made. Hey, what's on the rest of the menu today? Well, of course, that was Chris Hayes opining about Trump being terrified of a rat in his midst. A rat? I think by Trump's standards, there might be a few rats. Mm-hmm. We would call them, Americans. Though, I don't know. They're still crooks. The only reason I think the people are, ratting out is because they know it's the only way to keep them from being put in solitary for very long. Well, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, by the way. Mick Mulvaney has been lobbying to exempt a friend's company from Trump's tariffs. Yeah, I mean, come on. Trump's tariffs are really hurting people, and, if you know someone, maybe it won't be so bad. Ryan Zinke was caught red-handed trying to illegally sell off public lands. He's such an idiot. But it's like they don't care. And even though he was caught red-handed, what do you think's going to be done? Really? And top Democrats want to know if John Bolton disclosed his work with NRA-linked Russian spy Maria Butina on his security clearance application. I think that his security clearance application is going to be in the same file with Kavanaugh's records from when he said, you can crush a kid's testicles, and just because you're the president, you want to, and we'll blame it on John Yoo, who probably brought it up anyway. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Georgia police chief defended tasering an 87-year-old grandmother for picking dandelions while not speaking English. She just wouldn't comply. And celebrity chef Jamie Oliver is accused of cultural appropriation for his microwaveable travesty, jerk rice. Jerk rice? Jerk is barbecue. You can't barbecue rice. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link, which is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and she is still in dire need of funds in which to complete the software and hardware upgrade that is pretty much required to be able to do what she does, and she will do it. So please, if you can throw a few funds her way, that would be fabulous. Across from the chat room link on the leftish of our homepage at netrootsradio.com are the general Netroots Radio contribute donate buttons, and we are unable to do this without you. And thank you for your generosity, truly. There's really no joking around about this. And the lights are blinking, and your help is always... We're on the left, okay? We're not getting any Soros checks. The Soros checks went the way with the jetpacks, okay? Promises, promises, promises. So thank you for your generosity, and we will continue resisting the way Resistance Radio has been meant to resist. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We're also on Facebook as Netroots Radio. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I also post show notes and links, diaries, about 10 minutes before showtime for each show. And that can be found at Daily Kos, where I am known as Justice Putnam, my true name. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Okay, I know, it's weird. But we are on Facebook as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, so we're over there. And finally, podcasts of the show can be had by way of iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so we better get on with this story about Mick Mulvaney. You know, I hate Mick Mulvaney. He's there's just, people say, you know, that there are some faces that are just, you know, they're just punchable. I hate the idea of that kind of violence. You know, it's like I want to punch somebody in the face just because of the way they make me feel. I mean, that's so wrong. But, like I said, intellectually, you know, you understand it. But viscerally and, you know, our animal nature. Some people call it the lizard brain. I like to call it, well, you know, your sort of animal nature. Blame it on the animals. Nonetheless, Mick Mulvaney needs to be stopped by any means necessary. And I don't mean anything other than our electoral takeover of government. Okay? That's what I mean. This is out of Think Progress, by the way, by Joshua Eaton. Mick Mulvaney is quietly lobbying to protect a factory in his old congressional district run by a friend and campaign contributor. Well, of course. And he wants to protect them from the impact of Trump's tariffs. Mulvaney, a former Republican congressman who now leads the Office of Management Budget and also sort of runs the Consumer Financial Protection Board, too. Though that's going to be handed over to a white nationalist lady, so that's always good. Well, he's been working behind the scenes on behalf of Element Electronics, a television assembly plant in his former district, since before the tariffs went into effect earlier this summer. He knew something was coming up. Mick has been an advocate from day one. Ralph Norman, a representative of the area, Republican, of course, who replaced Mulvaney in South Carolina's 5th Congressional District. He was trying to get tariff exclusions well ahead of the announcement. He was trying to get the White House to take a look at it, or at least look at it. Democratic State Senator Mike Fanning, who represents the district where Element is based, also confirmed Mulvaney's involvement in efforts to save the Fairfield County, South Carolina plant. Well, so is that bad? Yeah, it might be, especially if your friend and campaign contributor put about $5,400 into Mulvaney's 2016 congressional campaign. And Element is also one of the only remaining employers in Fairfield County. The county lost 200 jobs when its last textile mill closed last year, and 5,000 more when a long-running nuke project fell through. And just a year earlier, the county lost 300 more jobs when its Walmart closed. Walmart closed? That's really a depressed area. So let's hit the local areas with, tariff restrictions. But Mick Mulvaney has come to the rescue because he knows who his friends are. This is not the way government is run. They think this is a mob operation, like Russia. Think Progress brings us this offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Zinke, Ryan Zinke, got caught red-handed trying to sell off public lands when he said he wasn't going to, and court said don't do it. And his plan also, by the way, included selling part of Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. Yeah, just, mineral, timber interests, whatever. Environmental groups caught the Department of Interior trying to sell off part of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in Utah despite a pledge by Secretary Ryan Zinke never to put public lands up for sale. Yeah. Well, after massive backlash from environmental groups and the public, the Bureau of Land Management late Friday canceled all plans to sell off the land. The 1,610 acres of public lands the BLM proposed selling to private interests had been part of the national monument until Donald Trump, in an extremely controversial move, radically shrunk the size of the monument last December. Well, the environmental group's work shows that diligence pays off and is likely an omen for what we're going to uncover as we dive deeper into Secretary Zinke's plans for leasing and decimating this national treasure. And that was Nicole Croft, executive director of the Grand Staircase Escalante Partners. Zinke has criticized environmental groups for accusing the Trump administration for wanting to steal public lands by rolling back monument protections, which is exactly what they are doing, stealing public lands. And he's pledged many, many times, oh, no, we're not going to do it. We won't sell off public lands. But last Wednesday, the Trump administration released its management plans for the much smaller Grand Staircase and Bears Ears national monuments that placed a priority on energy development and included the plan to sell off almost 2,000 acres of public lands. That's nice. Either Zinke had a change of heart about selling off public lands or does not have a clear understanding of what his agency is doing, but none of the environmental groups or a court who has now become involved thinks that it was a mistake. The attempt was more than just Zinke's dirty scheme to illegally sell off public lands, as some of the land slated for sale is adjacent to land owned by an avid Trump supporter and a current Republican lawmaker in Utah, the Sierra Club said Friday. That one parcel of land, one parcel of the public land that the BLM proposed selling was a 120-acre property that sits adjacent to 40 acres owned by Utah State Rep. Mike Knoll. Of course, he's a repug, and which were removed from the monument. Yeah, just give him a cool 200 acres. Round it off. Knoll applauded Trump's decision to shrink the size of the Grand Escalante Monument, and he unsuccessfully attempted to rename a Utah highway after Trump to thank the president for the executive order so that he could get his cool 200 acres. Blue Media brings us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Top Democrats on the House Oversight Government Reform Committee want to know if Trump's national security advisor John Bolton disclosed his connections to Maria Butina, a Russian spy with close ties to the NRA. Now, of course, Carolyn says alleged, but we know what's up. Prior to being appointed to a top position in the Trump White House. That was John Bolton. Representative Elijah Cummings, the committee's ranking Democrat, pardon me, and Representative Stephen Lynch, the ranking Democrat on the panel's National Security Subcommittee, wrote a letter Monday urging Chief of Staff John Kelly, yeah, this is going to happen, to turn over records that would reveal whether Bolton reported his work with Butina on a security clearance application or any other vetting documents. Well, of course, but will we ever see it? I'm telling you, it's in the same file as what Kavanaugh should be giving up. Well, Butina, a Russian citizen living in the U.S., was arrested last month and accused of infiltrating U.S. political groups, including the NRA, on behalf of the Russian government, according to an FBI affidavit. Butina worked as an agent of Russian banker and Putin ally Alexander Torshin to, quote, advance Moscow's long-term strategic objectives in the U.S., in part by establishing relationships with American political organizations, including the NRA, end quote. In the letter, Cummings and Lynch cite a 2013 video showing Bolton, a former National Rifle Association official, appearing alongside Butina at a roundtable discussion about gun rights that was reportedly sponsored by the Russian organization Right to Bear Arms. Yeah, look, when they say right to bear arms, they mean the Russian bear. And they're going to come right over here and they're going to be armed. They won't be there. There's no gun movement in Russia. Putin doesn't allow that, neither do any of his friends. And they're all mobsters. You're not going to give just anybody off the street a gun. What do you think this is? America? Well, during the discussion, Bolton expressed his support for amending the Russian constitution to broaden gun rights and offered his encouragement as Russia considered, quote, embracing freedom. Yeah, they're inactive measures, buddy. Well, the Bolton video appears to be another plank in a bridge built by Russia. Two conservative political organizations in the United States reported NPR in March, citing that video as evidence that Bolton worked directly with a Russian citizen who has now been charged by federal prosecutors with spying against the United States for years. The lawmakers pressed Kelly to produce records pertaining to Bolton's security clearance, as well as any other related documents reviewed by the White House before appointing him as National Security Advisor. Now, of course, this is not going to happen because Trump is king. There's no oversight on the king. Well, Butina has pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiracy to act and failing to register as an agent of a foreign government. The charges against her allege that she secretly acted to advance Russian interests by cultivating relationships with influential groups, including the NRA, and individuals close to the Republican Party. The very idea that an acting national security advisor worked with an alleged Russian spy within the past 5 years would likely be grounds for immediate revocation of a security clearance in any other presidential administration. But in the Trump administration, it seems that inappropriate contact with Russian officials is an asset, not a liability. And for now, Trump likes Bolton and Bolton likes Trump. As soon as Bolton stops liking Trump, he'll have a security clearance pulled. It's how the king works. Let's get on to our break, and when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Abandoned pueblos are scattered throughout the southwestern U.S., and at many, archaeologists have uncovered a curious artifact, the skeletons of scarlet macaws. The bird's bright red feathers are known to have been an important status symbol, a signifier of prestige, for people throughout the American tropics and the Southwest, both in the ancient world and today. But macaws are a tropical bird, whose range never extended north of today's U.S.-Mexico border. So how did the Pueblo people obtain the birds? To examine the bird's origin, scientists sequenced mitochondrial DNA found within macaw bones from 2 sites in New Mexico, Chaco Canyon and the Mimbres region. Turns out nearly 3/4 of the birds had identical mitochondrial genome sequences, meaning the ancient birds came from the same maternal line. That suggests they were all the products of a breeding operation, perhaps in modern-day northern Mexico, rather than a random collection of wild-caught birds.
If it was more random, forget the word plucking random macaws from the environment, then we would have expected to see a type of diversity that you'd see in the wild.
Richard George, a PhD candidate in anthropology at Penn State.
And so when we took our results and compared them to macaws that were distributed throughout the historic and modern ranges, the results were more analogous to other species of animals that were being bred, like turkey or dogs or pigs.
The details are in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The discovery adds an additional layer of complexity to our understanding of Southwestern and Mesoamerican cultures. They had the sophistication to breed and manage the distribution of these exotic birds. And it's an example, too, of how modern sequencing technology can unlock historical and cultural secrets that sat waiting in these bones for more than 800 years. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey, kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The American colonies in the 1770s was a land of opportunity for many new arrivals. If you were a colonist arriving here from Europe, one of the first things you would have noticed was the vast size of the colonies. For example, both England and Scotland together were smaller than the present states of New York and Pennsylvania. The distance between northern Massachusetts, which is now the state of Maine, and southern Georgia was more than 1,000 miles. The American colonies also had abundant natural resources, including vast tracts of timber, minerals, and a wide variety of animals, which provided meat, furs, and other products. The colonists also exported many products to Europe, including valuable whale oil harvested by colonists from Massachusetts and Rhode Island, which generated thousands of British pounds in export income. Americans were a hard-working people and had the highest standard of living in the world. The land was fertile and crops grew well. As a result, the colonists had rich diets and tended to be healthier than people in Europe. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Engelhardt. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The president sat for an interview with Reuters on Monday. Trump said he was worried that any statements under oath he provides to special counsel Robert Mueller could be used to bring perjury charges against him as part of the probe into Russia's electoral interference. He was echoing the concerns of his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who has warned that any sit-down with Mueller could be a, quote, perjury trap. Trump expressed fears that investigators could compare his statements with those of others who've testified and that any discrepancies could be used against him. Quote, so if I say something and Comey says something and it's my word against his and he's best friends with Mueller, so Mueller might say, well, I believe Comey. And even if I'm telling the truth, that makes me a liar. That's no good. It doesn't really make sense, but that seems to be the reasoning behind the ridiculous statement about the truth made by Giuliani on Meet the Press on Sunday.
Look, I'm not going to be rushed into having him testify so that he gets trapped into perjury. And when you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. The President of the United States says, I didn't...
Truth isn't truth. Mr. Mayor, do you realize what...
No.
This is going to become a bad meme.
Don't do this to me.
Then again, this administration has always had a strange relationship with the truth.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts.
I believe that we have to be honest with the American people. I think sometimes we can disagree with the facts.
Over time, facts develop.
If fact counting is anything, we've never had anybody with the level of mendacity that he has. Not even close. But we'll leave it
there. It's in the eye of the beholder.
No, facts are not in the eye of the beholder. You're always welcome here to argue the case.
You can look at a set of an argument or a set of facts and come out with one opinion. Someone else can say, while the facts are the same here, I come out with a different conclusion.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
I'm a person that wants to tell the truth. I'm an honest person, and what I'm saying, is exactly right.
Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news.
In his Reuters interview, Trump also declined to say whether he might strip Mueller of his security clearance, but continued railing against the probe, repeatedly calling it a disgrace and arguing that Mueller and other members of his team were biased. Trump asserted that he retained the power to intervene in the probe, but had chosen not to do so for the moment. Quote, I could go in and I could do whatever. I could run it if I want, but I decided to stay out, he said. I'm totally allowed to be involved if I wanted to be. So far, I haven't chosen to be involved. I'll stay out. end quote. Trump's rantings on Twitter are a regular occurrence. He seemed even more unhinged since the New York Times ran a story about the White House counsel, Don McGahn, cooperating with the Mueller probe. He took exception with comparisons to John Dean, the White House counsel during Watergate, who wound up cooperating with the special prosecutor. John Dean responded to Trump calling him a rat.
First, your reaction to the president's tweet, which, let me read it one more time. The failing New York Times wrote a fake piece today implying that because White House counsel Don McGahn was giving hours of testimony to the special counsel, he must be a John Dean-type rat.
I did respond in a tweet that I don't think that Trump understands what's going on. We know he's somebody who does not really reveal his full factual problems with his attorneys. They have to sort of find it out the hard way. So I suspect, and there was no indication in any of this reporting that McGahn was briefed or debriefed before he went in or came out. So they don't really know what he told the special counsel. And I can tell you this, that even if he didn't go in with the intent to incriminate the president, putting everything in a timeline for the special counsel is just invaluable information. And this 30 hours is more than enough time, and that was just set as the minimum. There may have been more conversation in that 30 hours. He doesn't like the truth to come out. He doesn't know what McGahn has or has not said. And I think the proof will obviously be as this thing further unravels. And I think we'll look back on this story as pretty significant.
On Tuesday night, Trump heads to coal country to campaign for Republican Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, who's trying to unseat Senator Joe Manchin in a state the president won by more than 40 points. While there, he'll roll out his alternative to Obama's climate rule for coal plants, which will effectively allow states to regulate their own emissions. A Kremlin-backed cyber operation that was targeting several anti-Trump conservative think tanks was reportedly foiled by Microsoft last week. The company said early Tuesday that it had seized 6 websites set up by the hacking collective known as Fancy Bear, a group controlled by the GRU and believed to have been behind the 2016 Democratic National Committee hack. Microsoft received a court order to take control of the sites, including several that were apparently disguised as congressional staff websites. Microsoft said there is no evidence to suggest the domains were used in successful attacks, but the company is still working with the target organizations to determine if any information was compromised. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener funded, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. A new week brings mixed news for Iran as the U.S. dials up sanctions on the country. On Monday, Iran's oil minister announced that the French energy firm Total will be suspending work on the massive South Fars natural gas project in Iranian waters of the Persian Gulf. That's unwelcome news for Iran, which has said it will only continue to abide by the terms of a 2015 nuclear deal so long as the country receives economic benefits for its good behavior. Total's pullout from Iran is also bad news for the European Union, which has tried to lobby European firms to keep doing business with Iran despite threats of U.S. retaliation. But not everyone is doing as Washington instructs. On Monday, Reuters reported that China intends to keep buying Iranian oil after U.S. sanctions banning Iranian exports kick into effect in November. The U.S. had tried to limit Iran's oil trade by preventing international insurance firms from insuring Iranian cargoes, making high-value international trade all the more risky. But China will get around those restrictions by making Iran insure its own oil exports. To experts, China's decision to ignore threats from Washington isn't a shock.
Not a surprise at all.
Muhammad Elahi is a professor of international business at Quinnipiac University.
If you look historically, China never likes the idea of unilateral sanctions. If it were a UN sanction as opposed to a US sanction, China would have followed the sanctions.
One country that did respond to U.S. appeals and announce a halt in Iranian oil imports was India. But Elahi says Indian and Pakistani policymakers could end up rethinking that decision.
Now, if China defies U.S. threats, I think India may very well, down the road, decide to ignore U.S. sanctions.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, indeed. Well, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to be a bit warmer. Looks like we will be up in the upper 90s, maybe hitting 100. It's mostly cloudy at the moment, so it's keeping it a bit cool, though the air quality is not good because smoke was brought in. Though for a while, it's been not so bad. So hopefully we will, this air quality active alert will change, but for the moment in the area it's considered unhealthy, and we'll get to that in a moment. Winds are out of the southwest about 1 to 2 miles per hour. They will be shifting out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. I apologize. Actually, winds will be light and variable out of the northwest. There is a trough of low pressure just sitting off the coast that's weakening the high pressure that we've had here. So I actually expected maybe winds to be a little bit more involved in that, but it will pick up tomorrow to the usual 5 to 10 miles per hour, and that's what I call somewhat of a light scouring wind. Pressure is holding steady at 29.86 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles because of the overcast. Relative humidity is at 61%. Grass pollen is considered low. That air quality index is unhealthy at 155 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is high at 7. Okay, so put on some sunscreen anyway. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 78 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 79 and cloudy. Rome is 89 and partly cloudy with an active thunderstorm and lightning alert that could impact critical infrastructure such as the electrical grid. Kiev is 82 and fair. Kabul is 84 and fair. Hong Kong is 80 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 82 degrees and fair. Sydney, Australia is 52 and clear. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 73 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Pike of Think Progress brings us this first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Now, cops changed fast after Columbine. Why won't they adapt to society's new expectations on roadside encounters? or just even in the neighborhood. Police in Georgia were right to electrocute an 87-year-old woman who didn't understand that they wanted her to drop the gardening knife she was using to cut dandelions, their boss says. In my opinion, it was the lowest use of force we could have used to simply stop the threat at the time. Chatsworth Police Chief Josh Etheridge told the local Daily Citizen News. Martha Al-Bashara, a grandmother who doesn't speak English, still had the ability to hurt an officer, he said. 87 years old, stooped over cutting dandelions with a gardening knife. Now, a local Boys and Girls Club employee found her harvest in a field next to where the lady lived with her children and grandkids to be disturbing. Now, the photograph of her, she looks East European. So that is disturbing in Georgia, I gotta say. So now there were, of course, other types of behaviors, tactics that the police could have used on an 87-year-old woman who didn't speak English. Like, I don't know, maybe looking at her in the face and saying, I don't understand what you're saying. And then she could say, I don't understand what you're saying either. Like through some kind of sign language. Keep your distance away, since an 87-year-old woman must be so spry that she can take out a cop with all of his, Ninja Turtle uniform and outfit. Give me a break. You can't physically take a knife out of an 87-year-old woman's hands. Well, maybe, and this is brought up in terms of the training that police should be getting instead of this constant fear that the citizenry is a threat until proved otherwise. And proved otherwise is when you've shocked them, electrocuted them, and cuffed them. How about maybe an expectation that you might get your little hand cut from a gardening knife from an 87-year-old woman? Is this really the policing that we want? Apparently, yes. It's all about compliance. It's all about bowing to authority. And your democracy doesn't work in a police state.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mike Moffat of the San Francisco Chronicle brings us this little bit of restaurant gossip here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Well, Jamie Oliver, celebrity chef. Some of them call him an English chef. Some of them might say he's Australian. Some of them might say he's from New Zealand. But he's a celebrity chef nonetheless, and he's in hot water for pushing a new dish that he calls punchy jerk rice, and Caribbean purists say there's no such thing. Because it's not microwaveable. Give me a break. Well, he's accused of cultural appropriation for hawking a new microwaveable product that he calls punchy jerk rice. That's reported by the BBC. Jerk is a cooking style native to Jamaica in which a hot spice marinade, known as Jamaican jerk spice, is rubbed on meat, not starchy grains. And jerk rice, some social media observers noted, is not a thing. So a lot of people took to Twitter to take Jamie to task, and they didn't like it very much. Now, remember, most jerk marinades contain allspice, Scotch bonnet chilies, thyme, soy sauce, ginger, lime, garlic, onions, and sugar. And Oliver's concoction get its punch from just garlic, ginger, and jalapenos. Doesn't really sound Jamaican to me. Doesn't even sound anything close to jerk. But if you call it jerk, people will buy it. Sort of like gluten-free. You know, you can get that gluten-free water. And people will buy it because it's gluten-free. But water's already gluten-free. But put gluten-free on it, people will buy it. Put jerk on it, and you've appropriated someone else's cuisine, call it your own, and people will say, wow, this is just like chop suey. Probably is. Now, The Guardian reported that TV chef Rusty Lee, who was born in Jamaica, tried Oliver's rice and did not like it. Jerk means barbecue, she told The Guardian. So you can't barbecue rice. You know, if you tried to barbecue rice on a barbecue, it would fall through. It's so ridiculous. And Butler and Lee were joined on Twitter by other defenders of the true Jamaican jerk. But some people felt that Butler and other jerk purists needed to calm down. Really? You mean people not from Jamaica? Like Butler's fellow MP Neil O'Brien? If Jamie Oliver isn't allowed to make jerk chicken because of its cultural appropriation, she's going to go mad when she finds out about Jamie's Italy. And, of course, Jamie's Italy is a cookbook by Oliver about Italian cuisine, which the Italians hated, too. Well, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And, Jamie, stop going for, like the easy advert spectacle here. Jerk. Nah, call it something else. Jalapenos? No. Scotch bonnet chilies, buddy. Scotch bonnet chilies. Okay, well, like I said, we are at the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Netroots Radio broadcasts on. I should confess that I had to put myself in a bubble a couple of hours, so I have no idea if the Manafort jury has come back with a verdict, and who knows what's going to happen with that. But we will find out later today, of course, on Netroots Radio, and we'll visit with you tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays and do that. So continue listening to Netroots Radio for all that breaking news, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.